Welcome back. Today's video is a basic overview of wind, what affects it, how to read and adjust for it, and how to position yourself to avoid it. Wind has a huge impact on accuracy and precision. We can make the best cartridges and have awesome control behind the rifle, but wind can easily put all that effort to shame in a split second. It's the bane of many a hunter and competitor. We have to concern ourselves not only with how wind velocity affects bullet flight, but also how varied terrain can warp that velocity. We also need to be cognizant of how wind affects our shooting platform. A sudden gust can throw our balance off and tip the barrel at precisely the wrong moment.
Yo, that was like 3 plates left.
Dude!
That bullet went like that. I literally saw it just nose out and disappear.
First, let's look at what affects the direction and strength of wind currents. Wind is created by pressure gradients in the air and is altered by temperature and friction. In the northern hemisphere, the rotational Coriolis force also deflects wind to the east. Wind moves in the direction of low to high temperature, that is, high to low pressure. In the case of mountains and valleys, during the day, the warmer air at the base of slopes is forced upward by the cooler air on the valley floor, creating what's called valley wind. At night, this process is reversed, and cooler air flows down the mountain slopes, creating mountain wind, which is usually stronger than valley wind, especially in winter. When mountain wind continues down the more gentle slopes of canyons and valleys, it's called drainage wind, and can become quite strong. The gradients between land and sea temperatures also create wind currents, with land temperatures changing faster than those at sea. During the day, the cooler, denser sea air drives wind inland, creating sea breezes. The reverse occurs at night, with cooler land air driving wind back out to sea, the so-called land breezes. Wind also transports water vapor and particulate matter, which increases density at its destination. Then there's friction, either between adjacent wind currents or between wind and land features. The stronger the adjacent winds or the rougher the terrain, the greater the friction, which ultimately slows wind speed and alters its direction. Such areas of shear create turbulence, so if you're shooting in an area where features suddenly change, be prepared to see significant deflection of your bullet trace.
1 plate left.
Our shooty spot was recently logged, so there's now bald ground adjacent to thick woods, creating quite vexing conditions. Large features like mountain peaks and saddles create choke points for wind, causing increased velocity on approach, with a drop on the other side where eddies are created. Wind speed also increases with altitude, in part due to the absence of friction from land features, but at higher elevations, lower gravity also plays a role. If you shoot over a canyon, the wind impacting your bullet midway across is stronger than that at your muzzle or your target. And lastly, wind speed tends to increase as clouds roll overhead due to a drop in temperature, so you may want to wait until they pass by to pull the trigger. To begin reading wind, it's best to start with simple conditions: steady wind over even ground. 2 common ways to estimate wind are mirage and motion. As a side note, devices like the Kestrel are great if the wind is the same from your muzzle all the way through your bullet's path, but that's often not the case. And flags planted at target may not provide much help either, since wind there has little time to impact trajectory. Mirage is easiest to read using a first focal plane scope, so you can adjust parallax. Start with your parallax set to focus sharply on your target, gradually bringing focus back toward you to see changes in mirage at different distances. It's important to note that mirage viewed through your rifle scope represents effective wind speed, not actual wind speed. It's the speed you really care about to make calls. Mirage that boils straight upward requires no adjustment for wind. Mirage that tips at a 60-degree angle from horizontal represents a wind speed of 1 to 3 miles per hour. A 45-degree angle represents 4 to 7 miles per hour, and as it approaches a parallel vector with the ground, it's at least 8 to 12 miles per hour. Anything beyond that is not estimable using mirage, but we probably don't want to shoot through that at long range anyway. If mirage changes significantly as you pull your focus back, estimate wind speed based on which mirage has the longest stretch, that is, the longest time to act on your bullet. Motion includes what you feel on your body as well as what you observe in the foliage between you and the target. Unlike mirage, this is estimated in terms of actual wind speed, so a value will need to be assigned based on the wind's direction relative to your line of sight. Estimates of wind speed based on motion vary depending on the source, but here's one of the more complete guidelines. 2 miles per hour, very light wind with only occasional movement in a few trees, with only some of the leaves moving. 5 miles per hour, light, non-stop wind with most of the leaves moving. Tall grass almost shows wind direction. 7 miles per hour, constant movement of all the leaves in the direction of the wind. Tall grass gives a definite indication of direction. 9 miles per hour. In addition to leaves moving, twigs are lightly pushed in the direction of the wind. 11 miles per hour. Twigs are strongly pushed and bent with occasional whiplash motions. Once you have an estimate of wind speed, a formula is applied to calculate the windage hold required to a particular distance. Ballistics apps have formulas built in, taking into account details about your platform, cartridge, and shooting conditions. But for those who don't have a ballistics solver in the field or don't have the time to access it, there are a few simple equations to try. It's important to note that all of these equations produce full value windage, which is the hold required when the wind is 90 degrees to your line of sight. No value windage is when the wind vector is in line with your aim at 0 degrees and requires no windage adjustment. There are a myriad of diagrams out there showing variations on values between 0 and 90. This one uses a value of half at 30 degrees from line of sight and 3/4 at 60 degrees. So if your calculation produces a full windage value of 6 MOA, but the wind is 30 degrees to your aim, divide 6 by 2 to get an actual windage of 3 MOA. 4 simple equations commonly used include range minus 1, the Marine Corps formula, simple windage adjustment, and BC wind formula. The first 3 are based on the 308 Winchester using 168 grain OTM loads at sea level and provide windage in MOA. Range minus 1 was developed by Jeff Hoffman of Black Hills Ammunition and is stated to provide body shot tolerances within 1/2 MOA to fairly long distances. Assuming a 10 mile per hour wind, full value windage is yards divided by 100 minus 1. So at 200 yards, hold 1 MOA into the wind. At 300 yards, hold 2 MOA, and so forth. For different wind velocities or different values of wind, change your hold by whatever fraction is appropriate. For example, at 400 yards with a 15 mile per hour wind, 4 minus 1 equals 3, then multiply by 1.5 to get 4.5 MOA. And if the wind vector is 30 degrees, divide by 2 to get 2.25 MOA. The Marine Corps formula uses the following equation for full value windage. Yards divided by 100 times wind speed in miles per hour divided by a constant, also called a wind factor. That constant changes depending on distance to target, but is often simply held at 12 for the 308 Win, regardless of distance to get close enough for tri-dope. For other cartridges and conditions, the constant can be back-calculated based on windage tables using ballistic calculators. The constant is higher for faster velocity loads and more efficient bullets. The simple wind adjustment is the same as the Marine formula, except the constant is held at 10 for ease of doing math on the fly. As with the Marine formula, the full value windage is adjusted by whatever fraction is appropriate when wind direction isn't 90 degrees to line of sight. Lastly, the BC wind formula is based on the bullet's ballistic coefficient and provides windage in milrads. Convert to MOA by multiplying by 3.438. The G1 BC is typically used, but depending on your verified shot data, the G7 number may be more appropriate. The BC rounded to the nearest tenth and multiplied by 10 is considered the speed of your gun. So a BC of 0.4 is considered a 4-mile-per-hour gun. Full value windage is calculated as yards divided by 1,000 times wind speed divided by gun speed, up to 700 yards. For 700 plus yards, full value windage is yards divided by 1,000 plus 0.1, then multiply by wind speed and divide by gun speed. For example, if BC is 0.6, distance is 400 yards, and wind velocity is 10 miles per hour, full value windage is 0.4 times 10 divided by 6. So hold 0.7 milrad into the wind. At 800 yards, full value windage is 0.8 plus 0.1, then multiply by 10 and divide by 6 to get 1.5. For less efficient bullets, add 0.1 mrad between 500 and 700 yards. For higher muzzle velocities or very efficient bullets, remove 0.1 mrad at mid-range. It's always recommended to use a ballistic solver to double-check your math. Of course, all of these calculations, whether performed by an app or done manually, assume you're pretty sure of your wind velocity assessment. It's all too common to survey an area only to realize there's no good foliage or mirage to assess. Short, stubby grass or old stumps is all you've got. And where we usually shoot, the terrain is so complex that our assessments have to shift every 50 to 100 yards. This is precisely why Stephen and I have chosen not to hunt beyond 400 yards, particularly in rough terrain where wind currents are unpredictable. On open ground with a more steady wind, we might go a few hundred yards further, but our personal ethos requires a first-shot kill, if at all possible. For target practice, though, we will battle with our apps all day long to get that sweet sound of steel out past 1,000 yards.
Edge of plate, 11 o'clock.
One more component of shooting in the wind. It doesn't just affect your bullet, it affects you too.
Well, that wind picked up, didn't it?
Wind buffeting your barrel or your stance can throw things off right out the gate.
Wind always comes up the minute you put your finger on the trigger.
Choose a shooting position that's sheltered from the wind and time your shots between gusts. Wait for the clouds to roll past, same as you wait for your mind to quiet before pulling the trigger. Under all circumstances, get as low to the ground as you can, where you can expect less buffeting. It's more stable on the ground anyway. And take the time to scout the terrain before settling in. Seek out a stable platform for yourself and your rifle. And make sure there aren't small twigs or leaves between you and your target. Even pine needles can cause unwanted deflections.
Yep.
When it comes to dealing with wind, if nothing else, at least start by holding into it by some reasonable amount. Sometimes that's all we've got until a few shots into our run. And nothing beats time behind the rifle, especially with the help of an experienced shooter to help you call the wind. Good luck out there, and thanks for watching.
Plate center. Nice shot.